In this room, what you see behind you here on this sort of quite extravagant plinth is really the transformation of the silhouette in the early 20th century. So really in 10 short years, we moved from Calo Sur, who's at the very end, those three beautiful pieces there in their Belle Epoque silhouette, all the way through a number of sort of iterations of silhouettes over the 1910s, all the way up until our last two figures at the end, with the very top one being Chanel, who we know introduced jersey into the fashion repertoire. So at the very top we have a jersey jacket, and also Paul Poiret, who claims to have released women from the corset. Now there's a couple of designers who do that, but he is one of the designers who does that. And that piece there in the centre, we have attributed to him. It's a very signature look, and one of the things that is definitive or that defines that look is the fact that he's introduced, I guess, the very first trouser into women's fashion. It's called a jupe pantalon, so it's translated to divided dress. So you start to get that sort of sense of modernity and ease in fashion happening in this very early period. So with these examples, Krystyna's provided us with a rich history of that transformation of silhouette. The 1920s are demonstrated here with these lovely, lovely flapper dresses, as well as here with these two examples by Bouet Sur. Now, Bouet Sur were two sisters based in France, and they were known for their very decorative techniques, and also it's worth noting, as Isabel mentioned, that craftsmanship that is very much part of haute couture. So here they're working with ribbon workers in order to create the beautiful flowers on the pannier skirts, on both the pannier skirts. So we've got the sort of metallic silver ones here and the pink ones behind, and also the chantilly lace. So highest quality fabrics and highest quality workmanship. Here we have the 1920s referencing the 18th century. So we still see a much more linear silhouette through the bodice, the disappearance of the corset, you can see there, but also the wide skirt, which references that wide-hipped silhouette of the 18th century. So this is a silhouette that's probably less commonly known in the 1920s. It's called a robe de style, but was also a very active part of the 1920s, and great to be able to represent it through Krystyna's patronage.
One of the star pieces that I must draw your attention to in this room is just to my left here. It is a very recent acquisition from late last year, acquired by Krystyna Campbell-Pretty at auction for us, and it is, of course, one of the iconic works by Elsa Schiaparelli. Very important fashion designer in her own right, and also one very well known for her close association with the Surrealist artists, particularly Dali. It's safe to say I've been here at the gallery 23 years, and in that whole time a work of this calibre has been on our wish list ever since I arrived, and finally we have one. It's an extraordinary example of her famed embellished jackets, this one from her Zodiac collection from 1938. But the glorious thing here is not only do we have the jacket, but we also have the original gown that was worn with it. And better still, we have the whole story of who owned and wore it. It was owned by a woman called Vera Worth, who lived in the west of England in a city called Bristol. And she saved for it. She wasn't a woman of great means who had a wardrobe full of couture. She actually saved her pennies and bought this extraordinary gown and wore it to a very important function at her husband's workplace. And it remained with her as a most treasured item. Eventually, when her granddaughter turned 21, she gifted it to her. What an extraordinary thing to have as a 21st present. And then the granddaughter finally realised that it was so important, it really needed to find a long-term home. And they're delighted, in fact, that it's now here at the museum in Melbourne.
Really, this room is a testament to kind of post-war elegance and glamour, and it really represents that Renaissance in French couture that happened in the late 1940s and early 50s, which is really symbolised by Dior's new look. And so what we have here on the staircase is really a representation of some of the best French couturiers of the period. So we have a number of French fashion houses. We have Jacques Fath, we have Lanvin, we have Bruyère, we have Paquin, really with demonstrations of what they do best. We also have groupings of works which really speak to the dress codes of the era before everything kind of exploded in the 1960s. But we have works that represent day dresses, day suits, hostess gowns for entertaining at home. So we have some great examples by Madame Gray and Maggie Roof. This wonderful work, Aladdin, from Dior's second collection, which you might remember from the exhibition last year. Around the corner we have a suite of works by Christian Dior, which really do kind of, sum up two of his key looks from this early or mid-50s period. We have a wonderful work, Fête et Village, with its pink violets sprig embroidery from the new look silhouette, but we also have a great work which represents his H line, which was a lengthening of the torso and a dropping of that waistline. And this is a fantastic work because a lot of conservation has gone into preparing it for display.
Well, we're very lucky with this collection because there's very little that we had to do interventive conservation on. She's actually one of the very few we had to do a lot of work on. When we got her, she had actually been washed, and for any of you who have ever had anything with tulle, you know that's not a great idea. So the skirt was actually a whole bunch of different lengths. There's actually 6 layers of tulle in there, and each layer is about 4 metres of tulle, so it's a huge amount of tulle. So what we actually had to do is pretend that we were all working for the ballet, and we actually had to recoat the tulle with a starch layer to actually get it looking like a beautiful tulle tutu again. So, and we went layer by layer, and that was a very time-consuming exercise, but now she is back looking absolutely stunning, and certainly back in the silhouette that she would have been originally. So she was one of our most interventive treatments, but now she looks stunning, which is fantastic. Thank you.
And what I also find interesting is when it comes off display, how are you going to store it?
So we'll actually, again, a little bit like the ballet, we'll actually store her upside down like a tutu, so she actually retains her shape, which will be very interesting and unusual for our collection as well.
In this room, however, we pay homage to one of the really true greats of 20th century fashion, and that of course is Yves Saint Laurent. So all the works in this room, and there's 15 new works in total that have been acquired with Krystyna's assistance, are all dating from the earliest period in the 60s through the 70s, 80s, and right up to the time when he ceased designing for the house. But the work I'd love to particularly draw Krystyna out on is the backstory to the work that's directly in front of us here. We might just come around a little more to the front. It's from 2000, and it's named Homage to My House, basically. So for Yves Saint Laurent, it was about him reflecting on, the whole business of couture and what it's capable of. Right from the designer right through to the ateliers working in the house, and also the collaborators, because here we've got the extraordinary embroidery work of the House of Lesage, which of course is a key embroidery house for many of the couture houses. But what I'd like to hear more from Krystyna about is given this was only acquired maybe 3 weeks ago from an auction house in Paris, what was it that drew you to the work and compelled you to bring it here today?
Well, I think it is it on?
Yes.
Yes, okay. It is the ultimate creation of great beauty in embroidery and in sequining and everything. It's one of only two that were made. The other is held in the Yves Saint Laurent Museum in Paris, so we've acquired something very, very special, very, very rare. Its subtitle is Versailles, and I think it's very clear it was also influenced by the Hall of Mirrors. Somehow it looks like the Hall of Mirrors, that golden and crystalline look. There are pieces of rock crystal in there. It's not just Swarovski and sequins, it's rock crystal. And it really is an incredible creation. We acquired it at auction, as Katie said, on the 23rd of January. I think it was about 3 or 4 a.m., something like that. It came from the collection of a French socialite, Mouna Ayoub, who had vast wealth and could basically acquire anything and everything that she wanted. And it is the ultimate piece of achievement in all of the skills that go into a couture house. An interesting side note, before it was sent to us here, Lesage wanted to have it back to repair a few stray threads here and there, and only they would do it, and of course there was no charge, because it's a shared heritage now between Melbourne, Lesage, Paris, and Yves Saint Laurent, who are working very closely with us. Their archivists and fashion historians are working closely, because we now actually hold a significant amount of important Yves Saint Laurent. Well, it began with the acquisition of the Dominique Serrault collection in 2015, I think it was, which was 130 very well selected pieces of French haute couture. But then I thought, it's a good selection, but it's by far from complete. And it remained an area that we needed to build our collection in. For me, everything that we walk through and everything we see around us is history. It's history of, it's social history, it's history of women, it's history of social trends. I mean, in the corner there we have Saharian, and it's not quite the smoking, but it is apparently, it's within 2 years of the smoking, the androgynous men's dinner suit, which was adapted for the first time by Yves Saint Laurent for a woman to wear. And Katie tells me that in the mid-60s, a woman was ejected from a restaurant in New York because she was wearing trousers. It was under smoking. The saving grace apparently was the jacket was quite long, so she could take the trousers off and go in just wearing the jacket, and that was acceptable, which I find quite ridiculous. But it is everything that we live and look at every day. You can see the transition from all the rooms you've been in so far in terms of how society's changed, how women have changed, how our perceptions of each other have changed. And this is a visual record of that working of history. It's also a record of magnificent handcraft and artistic work. You see it there, you see it in all of the rooms that we've been through and that we will continue to go through. So for me it was important that Melbourne had this and that it was in the public collection to be shared by everyone and to be enjoyed by everyone, because it's lovely to look at. It's really fun to come through one of these exhibitions.
The first thing to draw your attention to is this wonderful room full of Alexander McQueen. And again, I mentioned one of the most powerful things about what Krystyna has done for us is enable us to collect in depth with particular designers. So here, in the next couple of rooms, we have 9 new extraordinary works from Alexander McQueen. And this is spanning his work for his own label, but also that for the House of Givenchy from that very first collection he presented in 1997 onwards. These are key works, some of them, for instance, from the famed collection, The Widows of Culloden. You can see the tartan pieces there in this room. But even more extraordinary, what Krystyna's been able to acquire is 2 of the toiles that were worked on by Alexander himself in the development of that collection. And you can see toiles we know usually are sort of a working model, often in calico or cotton fabric, quite sort of simple, a way of working through ideas. But what Alexander apparently insisted on is working in the fabrics themselves. So you can see they're much more detailed, but they literally have the tacking stitches. If you look closely, you'll see there's even a pin still in one of the toiles. So amazing document to the creative process to have. In this space, we have the work of two designers. One is Jean-Charles de Casterbajard, French designer who, of course, was particularly prominent in the 80s and 90s. Here we have a suite of 4 tunics of his that were created especially for the opening ceremony of the famed Lille Arts Festival in France, and speak very much to his kind of pop aesthetic, you know, using text, the high key colour, and even references to Andy Warhol. But the final piece that I'll draw your attention to is the work that brings this display up to the present day. This is, of course, a glorious example from the House of Dior under the design of Maria Grazia Chiuri. This is a work from 2019, and from the collection which many of you will be familiar with, where she drew her inspiration from the Mexican cowgirls who ride in traditional dress with beautiful full skirts, and they actually were part of the presentation of this collection. But in looking at this collection, she also went back into the house history and looked at textile traditions like the fabulous 18th century toile de joie prints that Christian Dior himself so beloved, and she's reworked and reinvented those for this more contemporary example. This is a great example of what you can do also when you have a really engaged, really smart and sympathetic donor who understands how important it is when you're acquiring works to be able to acquire everything. So here, no need for prop shoes, no need for the wonderful work of Richard Nylon to save us from a bald mannequin head. Here we have the hat, the bag and the shoes as intended and as designed by the designer at the time. So this is something that in the future, future version of myself is going to have to retrospectively try and find these pieces. So where